Okay. Okay, so let's talk about plate tectonics, how the mountains are created. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I'll talk about kind of, yep, the process of plate tectonics and what is creating. Let me move my chat over here to this side. Can you see my screen okay, where it shows continental drift? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this theory of continental drift. It was proposed by Alfred Wegener that at one point in time, all of the continents, so all the land on Earth, was all massed together in this supercontinent. We called it Pangea. And that over time, these continents, what we live upon, so like North America, South America, Australia, Asia, Africa, Europe, that they slowly moved apart. And the idea is, well, how are these landforms moving? And that's through the process of plate tectonics. So here in this picture, you can see the major continents. There's Africa, South America, North America, but it's kind of hard because you see all these other colors. And what these other colors are, like this giant one here, this yellow one, these are plates. And plates are giant chunks of the Earth's crust that actually move. So if we took the surface of Earth and we broke that surface up, we would have these giant plates. And what happens is these plates move in different directions and they're slowly moving. So when we're talking about moving, we're not talking about them like, we can actively see them moving like a car driving, nothing like that. We're talking this very slow, gradual movement. Like we're talking centimeters a year, like 2 centimeters a year, seriously. And so as we can see, the way that the plates move or how they interact with each other can create different landforms. So when we've got, hold on, sorry, just a second. Okay, I'm sorry. I've got a meeting going on in the background and I was making sure I don't have to pop back into that. Okay, so it's the way that these plates are moving. So if we've got a plate, so we talk about like the mountains, as we're talking about mountains, we've got two plates that are pushing together, they're moving together, and that slowly makes them uprise. Let me move on here. Let's look at, okay, I like this graphic here. Okay, so here in this one, the outcomes of plate tectonics. So the movement of these plates, what does that create? We've got plates that move in 3 different directions. We've got what we call transform, convergent, and divergent. So here we see them here. So convergent plates would be like this, like we just talked about, those 2 plates that are moving together, they crush upon each other and slowly push upwards. We've got convergent plate boundaries, and I like to think about converging, how you, 2 cards are converging on a road, they're merging together. Makes sense? Divergent, we've got divergent plate boundaries where they're diverging, they're moving away from each other. And you can see this is an example of divergent. They're spreading apart. When those plates spread apart, we see this like at mid-ocean ridges, it creates this opening into the inside of the Earth. And that allows then for new material to move upward, magma, and as it comes out to the surface, it becomes lava, and it hardens and it cools and it creates new land. So here in, I'll show you on another picture, we call this the mid-ocean ridge. And in the mid-ocean ridge, and this is the Atlantic Ocean, we've got new seafloor, new land being created because those 2 plates are stretching apart, allowing for an opening. So everything inside wants to come out. Pretty cool. And then we've got transfer plane boundary, and these are plates that sideswipe each other. So they don't move together, they don't move apart, but they kind of break past each other like a crunch, so to speak. And these types of boundaries create earthquakes. The most famous one would be the San Andreas Fault there in California, so San Francisco type area. We get, again, like I said, very massive earthquakes. Okay. There's a question in one of your assignments that talks about the Ring of Fire as well. And the Ring of Fire, what the Ring of Fire is here we go. This is the Pacific Plate. So this is a giant tectonic plate that it's moving. And along this plate, you can see all these little circles represent earthquakes. And all along here, we've got convergent plate boundaries. So these are where the plates are moving together. So where we get these convergent plate boundaries, we're getting all of this tectonic activity. This is where I'm here in Washington State, and I live right on the other side of the Cascade Mountain Range. And here we've got giant volcanoes. As you can think about the arc here, these are all mountains and volcanoes all through along here. So this is an area in the world, the Ring of Fire, named because it has the most amount of tectonic activity with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, because we've got those convergent plate boundaries. It's pretty cool. Let's see if I have any more about convergent plate boundaries. Yeah, pictures of my kids, huh? Let me go back. Oh, okay. So here, I like this. This is a pretty cool picture to see as well. This red mark, see the different colors in the picture. And here's our key down here. So we're talking millions of years. So we're looking at the land on Earth, the ocean floor specifically, and we're looking at the age of it. And so the red represents the newest land, the youngest land, so brand new land that's being created. The purple, blue and purple represent the oldest, and you can see there's a little bit right there. This actually is the Himalayan mountains. So as we think about a convergent plate boundary again, pushing that land upwards. And so here is where we have the oldest amount of land on Earth, as those two plates, those convergent plate boundaries, push it upwards, creating mountain ranges. And it continues to grow, continues to get taller and taller. This red mark here, though, again, like I said, this is the mid-ocean ridge. And here we've got the newest land being created on Earth. So we've got this crack in the middle of the ocean floor. And we've got two plates that are moving away from each other. So they're splitting apart and creating this opening where that new land is being created. So pretty cool visual of those two. Okay. So again, plate tectonics, thinking about plate tectonics, we've got the three types of plate boundaries, and each one of them create or have a different outcome. So an effect, okay? Like you talked about how mountains are created. So mountains, again, are created by a convergent plate boundary where we have two or more plates that are pushing together. As those two plates are pushing together, they're eventually going to push upward because they have nowhere else to go. So think about if you were to take two pieces of bubble gum, right? And you push them together, they squish, right? And they expand upwards. Okay, so thinking about mountains, that's created by pushing two plates coming together and pushing upwards, okay? Divergent plate boundaries, opposite effect. They're moving away, and so that creates an opening in Earth's crust. When we have an opening in Earth's crust, we've got the inside of the Earth, all that magma, that liquid Earth, can get out. So it's extra pressurized, heat and pressured in here. It's trying to escape from any direction that it can. So with the divergent plate boundary, we've got that opening that then allows for that magma then to become lava and create outward, creating new land. Transformed plate boundaries, again, if the plates don't move away from each other or together, they sideswipe, they move past each other. And that break, when that landmass actually breaks from each other, that the effect is then an earthquake. Pretty cool, huh? Am I helping on, Jackie? Am I getting your questions answered? Does it make sense?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah.
For divergent, I was wondering, like, I think I've read before. I was kind of confused that divergent are the ones that create mountains as well. I don't know. I was kind of confused because I've read that when divergent plates are like moving from each other, then lava comes out, and
Mhm.
then creates rocks when it cools down, and
Yep.
that's creating the volcanoes as well, or something.
Okay.
Yes.
You want me to explain that a little bit more? Yeah, okay, I can do that. Okay, so you had talked about, so when we talk about mountains, mountains are going to be caused by two plates that are going to come together, and that's convergent, okay? So two plates that come together converge. They push upward, creating these mountain ranges, okay? Then you talked about divergent. There's our other type of plate boundary. Divergent plates move away. And so, like you said, new land is being formed because we have this opening in the earth. And when we have that opening in the earth, you got to think about everything that's inside of our earth. It's super pressurized. Its idea is it's wanting to escape. It wants to get out, okay? And so it's looking for an opening to do so. So at divergent plate boundaries, where those plates spread apart, we get that new land being formed there, okay? You also might be hinting about hotspots. And there in the lesson, it talked a little bit about hotspots. And so when you think about these volcanoes, we can get volcanic activity like in mountain ranges, where again, what's happening is we have, again, all this magma inside the earth. It's trying to escape out. And so it finds like an opening or a crack to escape from, and we get a volcano. An example of a hotspot would be the Hawaiian Islands. So the Hawaiian Islands are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So here we go. You can see actually those yellow dots there is where Hawaii would be. And it's right in the middle of this Pacific place. So a lot of people are then thinking, okay, well why would there be tectonic activity then if it's not a plate boundary? See, it's just right in the middle of a plate. And it is possible to have earthquakes and volcanoes in areas away from a plate boundary, and we call that a hot spot. So what's happening is here on this plate, there is a weak spot in Earth's crust. And so again, all of that inside magma is trying to get up to the surface and get out. And so what happens is it finds that weak spot in that plate. And again, as it finds that weak spot, makes its way up to the surface. When it breaks that crack, the magma comes out, then it becomes lava, it cools, it hardens, and it forms new land. So as we think about Hawaii, that is what's happening. And what's also pretty cool is like with the Hawaiian Islands, it's still growing. There's still activity occurring here where these volcanoes are still creating new land. So that can happen there in a hot spot where we have a weak spot or a crack in one of the plates where it can create that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. You're so welcome. Anything else?
No, for now I think I'm good.
You're good. Okay. Well, Jackie, anytime you have questions, again, you can come onto these live sessions and we can go over it. Or anytime you have other questions, email your teacher. We're here to help you. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks. Okay. Hello and welcome. My name is Amy Defoe. I'm one of the science teachers here at Graduation Alliance. Today, I wanted to do a little mini lesson on one of the activities in Earth Science. It's activity 331, Inheritance in Action, and this comes from Unit 3. And I wanted to take a look at some of the questions that we see in this biology. So let me pull up where it is at. And I went too far, sorry. Okay, so in this assignment, it goes through, it comes right after the lesson kind of on genetics and inheritance, and it talks about genotype and phenotype. And we'll go through that as we kind of decode and kind of explain this lesson a little bit more, okay? So there's two questions that come with this activity. And the first question says, imagine that you are a doctor in a maternity ward, and during your last shift, 20 babies were born. 10 had blue eyes and 10 had brown eyes. 15 had round heads and 5 had pointed heads. Given the phenotypes, what are the possible genotypes for these babies? Okay, so I want to stop right there and let's break this question down, okay? So it's giving us this pretend scenario of, okay, these babies were born, 10 had blue eyes, 10 had brown eyes. What can we assume using genetics? What were the possible genotypes and the phenotypes? So the first thing we have to do here is figure out what the genotypes are, okay? So thinking about genotype and phenotype, let's go to, sorry, I'm pulling this from different parts, okay? So the genotype and the phenotype. Genotype is what makes the trait. So this is the actual information carried within the gene or the genetic makeup of that specific organism. So the genotype is determined by the makeup of the alleles or the form of the gene that produces a different effect, okay? Genotype is responsible for eye color, hair color, height, all of our genetic characteristics, okay? So where do we get these alleles from? Okay, we get our alleles from our parents, okay? So genetics is the passing down of traits from parent to offspring, okay? So with genotype, when we think about getting the genotype, let's use example for eye color. We're getting one allele from the mother and one allele from the father. Those two alleles combine and give the offspring the genotype, okay? So let's say mom has brown eyes and dad has brown eyes. Most likely, as they pass down their alleles, that genotype is going to be brown eyes and brown eyes. Brown eyes from mom, brown eyes from dad. Those two make up the genotype for the offspring, okay? So think about the genotype as the two alleles passed down from the parent to the offspring, okay? The opposite of that, not the opposite, but difference here is the phenotype. And this is the actual what you see. It's the visible or observable expression of the results of the gene. Examples of phenotype, again, eye color, hair color, height, sound of your voice, okay? You're thinking, well, it sounds like these are exactly the same thing. And in a sense, they are. It's, what the genotype is what you're actually coded for, and the phenotype is what you actually see. So there's a difference there because they can be the same, but they can also be different. Let me show you an example here. Okay, here we have listed the genotype for some flowers, okay? So we've got purple and a white flower here. So when we think about the genotype, we write the genotype using letters, okay? Letters, the letters don't mean anything, so there's no rhyme or reason to it being a P or a B. We just use a letter that goes along with the trait that we're talking about. So as we're thinking about, these pea plants here, the flowers, the P could have been chosen because it's a pea plant, or it could have been chosen because it's purple. Again, the letter doesn't really matter, okay? So again, in this example of this purple flower, the passing down here, the genotype, the mother gave a P, a capital P, the father gave a capital P as well. With this particular genotype, one parent gave a capital P, one parent gave a lowercase p. And with the white flower, we have two lowercase p. So the genotype are the actual two alleles. Now, you'll notice here that some of the letters are capital and some of them are lowercase. And what that has to do with is dominant and recessive, okay? Let's see if I can pull this up. Okay, so when we have a letter that's written with a dominant or a capital letter, we say that that allele is dominant, meaning it's going to mask the other. Think about this way. If you have, if one parent gives passes down brown eyes, an allele for brown eyes, and one parent passes down an allele for blue eyes, Do we see offspring most of the time that have, one of each? It can happen, like a mutation for sure, but in general, what happens is the dominant, or the one that the allele that is dominant, will mask or cover up that recessive, what we call recessive or non-dominant trait. So what we see dominant over time is going to be the trait that we continuously see over time. So again, instead of that offspring getting both of them, one for mom and one, being kind of mixed, rather the dominant one's going to mask and kind of cancel out that recessive. So that's why we talk about how phenotype and genotype can actually be different. Okay, so like here we've got capital T for a tall plant, lowercase t for a short plant. And this is, you could say this is mom, this is dad. They breed together and they produce offspring. And as we notice, all of the offspring are tall here. Okay, so as we write this, as again, when we think about it, we get one from each parent, and that produces a capital T and a lowercase t. So they're this is heterozygous because they're mixed here, and it produces, again, all tall. So looking at this, we can see the genotype that these offspring are carrying a tall allele, but also carrying a short allele. But that tall, having a capital T, as we can see, is dominant, as all of the plants here are tall. And so it masks that recessive trait, which is short, and it covers it up. So when we're thinking about genotype, all of the offspring are carrying one of each. But when we look at the phenotype and actually what we observe, they're all tall. So that's an example where they can be different. Okay, same thing here, going back to these pea plants. Okay, so we've got one offspring here that is dominant homozygous because it's got two capital P's. This one heterozygous, so it's carrying a dominant purple, and it looks like white must be our recessive. And again, that dominant purple is masking that white. And then we've got two lowercase p's, so this is recessive. The only way we can get that recessive trait is if both of the alleles are that recessive trait. Okay, so going back to that question, so we think about, well, then what are the possible genotypes for these babies? Okay, let's use the letter B for our genotypes. And as we think about these babies, 10 had blue eyes and 10 had brown eyes. Okay, so it's a little bit hard to determine because we've got such a mix. We know in common, think about it, in populations, what eye color do we see the most of? Brown. That's right. So we've got a capital B. So brown's going to represent a capital B, okay? But we also know that we have blue eyes here. So blue's going to be our recessive. So we're going to give a capital B and a lowercase b here. So this is one possible genotype that the babies could have. Another possible, we know with recessive, as we just saw with those flowers, to get a recessive, so to get those blue eyes, we know that we have to have two recessive traits to get those blue eyes, okay? So the possible genotypes for these babies would be a heterozygous, capital B, lowercase b, and a homozygous, lowercase b and b. So we've got brown and blue blue and blue. So again, this dominant brown here is going to cover up that blue, okay? So that's how we can get there. Sometimes I'll see students that'll say, well, BB is an option. Both parents pass down brown eyes. And that is true that can happen, but in the case where we have blue eyes, the only way that we could have possible blue-eyed babies, actually have blue-eyed babies, is that parent has to have is a carrier for both of them. It has to have that brown and that blue. If we had B and B and it mixed with this, it would only produce brown-eyed babies. So we wouldn't have any opportunity to have blue. So your choices for this particular one would be capital B, lowercase b, and recessive BB. Those are the possible genotypes to get brown eyes and blue eyes. Okay. The second part of this question, what traits do their parents probably have? Use what you know about dominant and recessive traits to explain your answer. So we talked a whole lot about this. We know that blue eyes is recessive. So those parents, both of those parents have to have some type of blue eye in them. Most likely one parent is going to be that, one parent is going to be that lowercase bb, okay? And the other parent, like we said, has got to be that, my letters aren't working with me here. So again, looking at what our possible genotypes is, the parents would have to be, one parent would be brown-eyed and one parent would be recessive blue, completely so. Again, talking about the reason, because that brown is dominant. Because that brown is dominant, it's going to mask that blue. So we know that one parent's going to have those brown eyes to pass down that brown eye for its dominance, but then the other parent has to be a carrier of all lowercase or recessive alleles to be able to pass that down, okay? So when we think about this, one parent has brown eyes and genotype B and B, okay? The other has blue eyes, which is B and B, okay? The dominant brown covers the recessive blue in one parent, but they still carry the allele for blue eyes. And so then as those offspring are then filtered out, as we can think we'd have B and B, B and B, and then here we get those blue-eyed babies because we've got this allele mixing with this allele. So we get two lowercase b's, two lowercase b's. So that's where we're getting that mix between the blue eyes and the brown eyes. Okay. Okay. So in this particular example, I'm just looking at the eyes. So again, here's an example for some students. They said for the genotypes for the offspring, here we've got our heterozygous, capital B, lowercase b, two of them, and then two homozygous recessive blue-eyed babies. So you can actually carry out a Punnett square to factor this out, okay? And then for their description, it says for their eyes, one parent with blue eyes, the other with brown. One parent with blue and brown eyes, while the other has brown eyes if brown is dominant, or blue eyes if blue eyes is dominant. Okay, so again, they're telling us that there has to be a mix, but that one parent is going to have that combination of both of them, but that dominant allele is going to mask that recessive one. Okay. So that was a quick little kind of explanation, an example on looking at activity 3.3.1, inheritance in action, looking at genotype and phenotype and using probability to figure out what the possible outcomes would be. Okay. Again, as you guys are looking ahead and working on your science, if you have questions at any point in time, please reach out to your teachers. We're here to help you. Also, if you would like to see a live session about a particular activity or a lesson or a concept, please let us know. Send us a chat, an email, instant message, whatever your preferred method of communication is. We would love to be able to share and give you a little bit more information on a topic that you would like to see more of. Great. Have a great day and a great week in science.